Manuel Guttierez was shot dead in the early hours of last Friday morning, just a few kilometres from here in a poor southern suburb of Santiago. He was apparently taking part in violent confrontations that were part of a two-day strike called by Chile's main trade union federation, the CUT. The police initially denied any involvement in his death. They said that their officers didn't fire any live ammunition that night, and a senior police general came out and said that as such there was no need for a formal police investigation. But it's later emerged that Manuel, who is just 16 years old, was indeed shot by a police officer using an Uzi semi-automatic weapon. The officer later replaced the bullets in the weapon to make it look as if it had not been used. He has been discharged, along with 4 other police officers. But the government says that's not enough, and they've called for the resignation of the police general, who initially denied any police involvement. On the political front, the centre-left opposition, the Concertación, has called for the resignation of the Interior Minister, Rodrigo Hinspeter, although he says he's not going. Meanwhile, Manuel Guttierez's family have launched legal action. The police officer who fired the fatal shot has now been charged with homicide. Last week's events were all part of widespread protests against the centre-right government of President Sebastián Piñera. Those protests have been led by the students who are calling for a radical overhaul of the education system, greater state funding for Chile's schools and universities. But they've not been the only ones on the streets. Miners have been out in support of the students. They've been claiming a greater share of the profits from Chile's all-important copper mining industry. Environmentalists have been on the streets too. They're seeking to try and block the construction of a huge hydroelectric plant in Patagonia and southern Chile. And farmers have been protesting about the impact of the strong Chilean peso on their exports. Indeed, there have been so many protests here over the past 3 months that some observers are calling this the Chilean winter. Chile's not seen protests like this since the 1980s and the days of the pro-democracy movement that defied General Augusto Pinochet. And indeed, some of the scenes we've seen here have been reminiscent of those days, with the youths throwing stones at the police and the police responding with tear gas and water cannon. The students are due to meet the government later this week for crucial talks, but they have a long way to go, and there's no sign yet that these protests are about to end. Gideon Long, Santiago,